And we're back. It's COMP228 Java programming, week 2, lesson 2, part 2. Last lesson we talked about GitHub. We also, or last video, we talked about GitHub. We talked about how to set GitHub up with Eclipse with eGit. If you're interested in doing that, again, not required, but recommend. We're kind of into lesson 2 today, so I want to kind of talk about more of other things, not just setting up Eclipse. Let's wipe away some of this stuff. I talked about conventions in the last video as well, using this underscore for private variables and so on and so on, and as well as the difference between static methods and variables and all that kind of stuff compared to the regular ones that we would normally be used to. Okay, let's take a look. So let's get rid of this for our example, and we also want to get rid of this because we don't need these things. For now, let's just leave this and save it. This is our main program. But I want to create another class that I want to access. Let's get the example going of the person class. I want to make a person class, right? And I know this is kind of really simple, but again, we'll see it in Eclipse, so you guys all know how to do this. So how do I do that? How do I create a new class from my files here in my project? What would you do? Fahim, what would you do? Where would I look at it? I click on the package, on the source, on the project. Where do I click? Package. Right click on the package. Why the package? The package contains all my files. The package is my namespace, right? I could try and do it on the source, but that would also ask me for a different package. Let's just go here to the right. If you notice, I can click class, new class, right? If I click class, it's going to ask me for my source folder. Here it is. It tells me the source already. And it asks me for the name. My name of the class has to be unique. Can't be the same class name as something else. There are no, I'm going to put it up there like this, partial classes necessarily in Java like there are in C#, all right? It's not the same way. So we need to create a class of its own. Let's just try this out, and we're going to name this thing person class, all right? Do we need a public static void main for my class? You're saying yes. You're saying no. Well, I'm sorry, and your name again is? Avneet. Yes. Love your name, okay? Avneet, it's neat that you're saying that, right? So you probably must have heard that a million times, and I apologize for that silliness, but the person class, the reason why you can't use a public static main is because we already have one, and you could, but it makes sense to add that in. It's in our program class. That's probably the only place we'll be using it in this class and when we do stuff together, right? And we're going to click, we don't have to click this. How about constructors from the superclass? Would we want to include that right now? There is no superclass other than our Java lang object, right? And how about inherited abstract methods? Well, there's no inherited abstract methods. We don't have to do that either. How about generate comments? Let's click that on to see what that does and press finish. When I do that, it gives me some comments up here. Like, for example, my author name, Thomas, Tom, right? I could accept those or delete them. I don't need them right now. For you, when you do your assignments, I'm going to ask you to put some comments in the head of your document. For now, let's leave it blank because we're going to talk about comments another time, right? And I don't have to leave a blank space up here. But what is the Java compiler, the Java compiler? What does it do with blank spaces? Ignores them, just like it ignores comments, right? So blank spaces and comments ignores. Okay, so I've got this public class person. What do I need to do now in order for me to, the next step? Do I need a constructor? Follow me here. Do I need a constructor? No, I don't need a constructor. It's nice to put a constructor in play, but I don't need one, right? A constructor is optional. What if I don't put a constructor? What does Java do for me, just like C#? It creates an empty constructor. That's what it does. When it compiles everything in bytecode, it creates an empty constructor, right? Let's see this in play. So if I want to have a couple of instance variables that are public, this is bad practice. Don't do this at home, kiddies. But let's just do this. I'm going to say public, right? What kind of things does my person have? My person might have, some properties, right? Because when we talk about a class person, he or she has some properties. How about gender? That's a property. I know that's kind of a controversial topic sometimes, but let's just leave that as gender, right? And public gender Now we have to say what data type is my gender. It's probably string, right? That makes more sense. So string gender, right? And if I just put a semicolon here, is that enough? I don't initialize my gender to anything. It's nothing. What I probably should put, and this is, some people like doing this as an initializer that's like this. Sometimes that's be considered bad practice in some circles. All right, you may want to initialize your instance variables in another method, like an initializer method, right? Or in your constructor. So for now, let's leave it as like this. All right, public string gender. All right, cool. What other things can we add into our person class? How about a name for our person? That's something we just kind of did, right? So public string name. So person name, right? That's something we can add in there too, right? I think that's good. I think we have a couple of variables we can play with, a name and a gender right now to start off our example. And I'm going to save this class, right? Here it is. I'm going to save it. And I'm going to go back to my program, right? And now I want to create a new instance of my program, my person class, and a person object. So let's create one that's in here. I'm going to say then up here, I'm going to say then that it's as a public static, variable, right? That I'm going to name Tom, or you can name it yourself, Tom, right? But the type is what? Person, right? So person is there, Tom, right? And that's what I want to put in. Well, what it does is it says, hey, I'm able to find person, and I can find the person class without an import statement. How come? How come I don't have to use an import statement for my person class I just created here?
It's in the same package.
It's the same package. If it's in the same package, the import statement is implicitly added. It's added in anyway by the Java compiler. It does not. I don't have to put it in. If it's in another package, not the default package, but another package I want to access, I need to use the import statement with the package name in order for me to access that class, right? Okay, so that's why this is okay. So now what have I done here? I've actually created a reference, right, to the person class. Have I instantiated it yet? No. I've created a reference to the person class. In fact, if anything, I've told the compiler that my variable name Tom, which by the way, I'll make it short lowercase, not uppercase, my Tom object, right? I haven't instantiated it, but I've created a shape for the object. Think of it that way. I've almost like set aside some room, some memory. I haven't really allocated memory, but I've said put some memory aside. I'm going to kind of build this Tom object in a second. I'm going to, use my teleporter and go poof, and Tom is going to appear, right? Once I instantiate him. How do I instantiate the Tom object? Or in your case, let's make it more generic. So instead of saying it's Tom, it's the lowercase person object. It's a person. Person lowercase of type person. Okay? How do I do that? How do I instantiate the person object here? What's my next step? I'm hearing person is equal to new person. I go person then, right, is equal to new keyword, person, right? Is that correct syntax? It's good. So I've got my person object. I should then, if I can do this, if I save, when I get to the next line, if you notice person now is blue, like it is up here, right? Can I do something like this? Person dot, and then look, it has name and gender here as an option, but it also has a bunch of other stuff. How come I'm getting all this other stuff in here too, as methods and all the other stuff that I'm getting? I never defined those things in my person class. How come I'm getting them? It inherits from the object class. This is all review, guys. Inherits from the object class, right? And that way it has built-in objects, built-in methods and properties that are inherited from the object super class, whatever you want to call it, the main superclass. All right, cool. So person dot, but I really want to say my person dot gender, right? I can assign it, right? I can say something like unknown, right? Maybe we don't know what the gender is right now, right, of the person. That's valid. And we can also do something like this. We can also say person, oops, if I can do it right, property here, person dot name, right? In this particular case, we don't know who this, we don't know who they are, but let's just make them Tom. Tom, you don't know his gender, right? Possible, right? I can tell you that he's definitely male, right? Right? I can tell you that for now. You might laugh, but the thing is, we're saying that, but we can make any kind of, we can assign this to any. There's no validator that's going to check to see if it's male or female or other. I can put whatever I want in there. Why is this bad? If I really wanted to have a property like this, there's a couple problems that I have here. What am I really doing that's not good? From a convention perspective, I want to hide all my instance variables in my class. I never want this to happen. I want to use a getter and setter method in order for me to access my, my instance variables. So I want to have something called properties. So again, what's the difference between a property and an instance variable? Properties allow me to access, they're accessor methods, if you will, allow me to access my, my instance variables. So the rule is private instance variables, public properties. Make sense? That's the general rule. Why? This way we adhere to the whole idea of information hiding, which is part of object-oriented programming and design. Okay, we want to do that. So we don't want to make this happen. This is working. We can do this, but it doesn't mean we should do this. I always go between good, would, and should. Should we? No. Can we? Yes. But it's not good practice. How do we fix this? Let's take this away for a second. Well, there's a couple ways we can fix this here. We don't have a constructor yet. Okay. How do I create a constructor, by the way? How do I make a constructor in Java? Does anyone remember or know? It's very similar to C#.
Public person.
Public person. Okay, I could do that. I could say something like this. I could say something like public person, and I could put braces, and I could put some kind of curly brace like this, right? Sorry, like this, right? Because it already includes a brace. I could do this, which is very similar to C#, right? My person, I have to, it's the same name as my class, right? I have my constructor. You know what good practice to do is here? I like to put in some kind of comments that say constructor, right? So that way no one's fooled. Here's my constructor. This is clear now. This is my constructor. This is the empty constructor, right? Nothing in there. Is there any difference between this and what I did earlier? No. Right now, it's not doing anything different than what it did before. So in fact, it's very similar. There is a difference in code. From a bytecode perspective, it does things slightly different. But from an output perspective, it's identical. All right, here's some problems. I have these strings, gender, and name, and I want to make them private now. So here's private, and here's private. Mark them as private. Oh wait, our convention tells me I should make these underscore private. Now there's nothing else there, so I'm just going to rename them right here. I'm not going to use refactoring. Normally we'd want to use refactoring. So they're both private, and I want to access them. I want to assign them. There's two ways I can do this. I can use getter and setter methods. That's good practice. Or I can pass in variables or values into my constructor. Both ways are pretty good. Let's use the getter and setter method. All right. How do I create a getter or a setter for my gender or my name? How do I do that? Yes. Say that again. I could generate it. Right? How do I do that? Right click on the name. Oh man, this is so easy. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I know. It's all crazy, right? Source, and I can go down here to generate element comment. I could do that. I could generate, oh wait, getters and setters, right? This is hard, right? What does it do? It tells me, it pops up this new window, this dialog box that says, hey, do you want to generate both the getter and the setter, or just the getter or just the setter? What do you want to do here, right? And if you notice, it says allow setters for final fields. Remove final. Final is like the equivalent of constant, right? Insertion point after the gender, right? Where do you want it? I can put it after my person class. This is my after person, which is where I really want it. I can put it before instead of after, right? It usually tries to, I can say first member, after last member. Where do I want it? I really want it after my name. Like this is where I want it before my person class, but after my name. For now, that's where I want the insertion point to be, right? Is it going to be public? Absolutely, because remember, private instance variables, public properties. I'm making a new property right here, or a getter and setter, same thing. Okay, and I can also generate method comments. I'm gonna leave that blank and press OK. When I do that, bam, it generates them. What is this really doing? Is this really a special way of doing this? Is this the way we do it in C#? No. In fact, these are two methods that I've inserted here. I've got a getter method and a setter method. It's exactly what C# does, right? But what this does is these getter and setters, they're just methods. So here's two good examples of what methods look like, right? This is how you make methods in Java. So let's kind of comment here and we'll say, you know, properties. So that's what they are. They're properties or getter and setter methods. You can call them whatever you like, right? So here's these two properties. I have a get gender and a set gender. If I don't like this, can I rename these things? Is anything stopping me from renaming? No. I can rename this whatever I want. And probably, you know what I like to do? I like to make it, I could have done it in my dialog box. I'd like to do something like this. Set gender, right? And, or sorry, that would be get gender. Get gender and set gender with a capital G. I don't like the underline as a convention. I like the camel case convention. That's me. All right, so now that I have these, I want to do the same thing for name. So let's just click on name, right click, and we could do that. We can go back to source, right? And we can go back all the way down to getters and setters, and I can do that. Or what if I want to do it by hand? Let's do one by hand, right? So I'll do that. So say public, all right, string, right? That's what's returning right now. That's a string type return of a method that returns a string. That's what this is. That's what this does. You're saying what type is my method, and this is get name, right? And I'm going to return in my method. I have to have a return this, and I like to use this dot underscore name. By the way, I want to rename this up here too with the this keyword. I want you to use the this keyword as much as possible, so we understand what we're talking about. You'll thank me later. Oops, that's wrong. And this is wrong. Why am I renaming this to gender and not the underscore gender? This one is the local variable that my method is asking for. I wanted to have regular gender without the underscore in there, right? But I want my this gender to refer to this gender up here, right? This is my gender instance variable. These are my private instance variables, or class members, if you will. That's what this does. Okay, cool. And I've got my getter and setter for my my gender. I want to do the same thing for name. I've just modified this a little bit, so you see I've made some changes here, right? Let's do the same thing for my set name. So public void. I'm not returning anything from my method. You guys should have seen this coming, right? Set name, right? And when I set my name, I wanted to, I don't want to return anything. I want to say this dot underscore name, and see how Eclipse brings it up for me, is then equal to name. Well, I gotta actually call for a name variable that's going to be passed in here. So I'm going to say, well, it's a string that's of name. We're just calling it name, right? So all I'm doing is creating my getters and setters. I just did it manually. I've renamed them a little bit, right? And that's all I've done. And this is wrong. It should be gender with a G. That one was wrong because I changed name here. I didn't change name here. I should have refactored, going with what I told you guys. Okay, so if this is cool, these are my getters and setters. Now I'm not going to see these anymore over here. My program can't run like this anymore, right? My program will run a little differently. Let's take a look. Here's person is equal to new person. Then person dot, I'm going to set my name. I'm going to set my name, right, to Tom, right? I can do that. That's valid to do. And if I want to, what if I want to output my person class? Well, I would use my system.out.println, system.out.println, and I want to output what? It's not it's person lowercase dot name. Now, here's the thing: I can't access my name, so I have to kind of do person dot get name, right? But I got to use in there in order for me to get the value of my name. I can't use Tom in there. I can't use person dot name because name lowercase underscore name is a private variable that I don't have access to. The only way that I can output to the console my name is if I use this get name method, which is our getter. So I've got two, setter, which I'm using, set Tom. I'm going to print Tom out, and when I run it, right, it should say Tom again, right? So I'm printing Tom out. Okay, cool. We can't do a class example without some kind of method that does something, right? So before we end for the day, let's do a class example with a method. So here are my public methods that I'll have access to, right? You see, I'm just making it into I'm just sectioning off my my class definition. This is my convention that I use. You can use your own. As long as it makes sense when I read it, I'm good. Okay, so here's my public void, a method that's public and void, so I'm not returning anything with it, right? Okay, here it is, public void. And in my method, I'm going to call this method runs, right? With a lowercase r, runs. Okay, it's not returning anything. There's my method. It's the runs method, right? So what is it going to do? It's going to output something to the console. This is this silly example, but it gets to the point, right? So system.out.println, and then we'll say the person's name, whatever it is, right? So how do we access that? This dot underscore name plus space runs, right? Make sense? I could do this differently, by the way, just like we showed last time. I could inject, right, this as I can interpolate this by adding in a %s, yeah? So this is one way of writing it. The other way of writing it is this way, right? %s, I'm putting a placeholder in here, right? Comma, this dot underscore name. That's the other way I could do it too. Both those methods are equivalent, right? But I need to use printf instead of println, right? And if I press save, this is a much nicer way of doing it. Okay? So I'm saying take this name and inject it where I put my %s. I can format it a little better that way, more control. Okay, I'm going to go back here now, and not only can I set my name, right? But I can also, after the name is here, I can put another command. I can use my method, person dot. If I type in runs, the R, it shows that runs is now available. Runs, right? Person runs. My person's runs command makes me run. It does something, right? So then let's check this out. If I run it now, the output should be Tom runs. You should get the same output. Take a look. Tom runs, right? Simple, silly example, right? Okay, let's do one more before we go. And then here's my person class. I can also set variables in my constructor. Remember, my constructor also has use as well. Right now, my constructor has one signature, right? It's the empty constructor, right? I want to add another property, right, which I'm going to make private. My private property is going to be an integer, right? And my integer is going to be age, right? I want to set my age integer in my constructor. That's kind of silly, but let's do it anyway. And I'm going to do this. in order for me to do that, I'm going to name the parameter here in my constructor like this, int lowercase age. Hey, I made a mistake. I named it age, right? I should do the underscore because that's part of my convention, right? It also helps me separate private from public, right? So what am I doing here in my constructor? The way to fix this, I can use my constructor like a setter, right? I can do this. This dot a underscore age is equal to age. Remember that whatever in the constructor in the signature is considered a local variable for the method. Even though this is my constructor, it's still a method. And all methods that have variables that are incoming into the parameter as a parameter, they're all local variables. They're not global variables. They're not class variables. Okay, I'm going to save this, go back to my program, and I see that I have a problem here when I instantiate my object. Here I'm instantiating my object, but I can't do it anymore because I don't have an empty constructor anymore. I need to put a value in there. And I'm going to put a value, 25. You believe that? Well, okay. Okay. How about 35? Believe that? Okay. All right. Okay. 46. There we go. Okay. So I'll put that in there. That's more like it, right? Yes, you're shocked, and I see the shock in your eyes. Of course, you're shocked. And then I will. I want to print this out later on, so I'm going to say something like system.out.print printf this time, and I'll say, wait, I don't have a getter for this thing. How do I print that out? Well, I can't. I can't print it out, right? So, you know, I have no access to it here because I don't have a public way of accessing the age variable, instance variable that exists in my my person class. So let's leave it as is. Now, it'll still run by clicking the run button. It's still there. Okay, but again, we've done just a recap before we go. Done a couple things. We've created a class in a separate file. We've attached it to our program file, our main file, right? I've talked about the way to do things like in Java that's different than in C#, in that we can create our getters and setters two ways. One, the way that Tyler suggested, which is let's use the automatic way of doing things by using our menu and Eclipse to create my getters and setters, or I can just create my own methods themselves from scratch on my own, hand code it, and it's fine either way. I will accept either method. I don't need you to remember how to do it. You can use the source way of doing it through Eclipse. That's fine. And also setting up the convention of underscores in front of your private variable names, as well as the idea that instance variables should be private and public properties, right? That's the way we should do it from an information hiding perspective. So lots of little concepts. I'm going to recover these in the video that I'm going to put out at around 7 o'clock tonight. So between 7 and about 9, something like that, right? So please, there's no physical class. You can certainly come here and use the classroom because it's going to be empty, right? You can come here and use it. I won't be here. I'll be broadcasting from home, which you could do too. You can go home and see it. You could also watch the video later. It's up to you. I'm going to go over the PowerPoint presentation that I already put up on your eCentennial documentation. That's the exact same thing I'm going to go over with a little bit more detail. I'm going to explain what all that stuff means. Okay? Any questions before we go? Yes? I will put a course outline in there just for you too. How about that? Okay, before we go. Anyone else? Yes?
Kind of question. What's the difference between print line and printf?
We covered that last week on the video. Print line is like write line. Printf is a formatted print equivalent, okay? Formatted print.
Can you repeat it, how we set the
How do I do it in the package? I right click on the package itself, right click, and I go new class. That's how I would do it, right? Okay? You have to move, you have to drag and drop it. You can drag and drop the thing too. Let me just update this on GitHub. But for now, guys, for the rest of you, see you later. Sayonara. I'll see you on the video tonight. Okay? Take care. Added person class. We'll do that. Add the person class up there. Modify the program class. I'm going to commit and push. And press OK. All right, great. And we're going to stop recording now. Thanks so much, guys, and see you tonight.